Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
And this is Bucky. And this is Fallout.
Yeah.
So this is our Storyteller Fallout journey. This is season 4, episodes 7 and 8 that we're going to check out today. And we also do something kind of special for Fallout.
We have a drink. So if it's your first time checking out Fallout with us, you definitely should binge everything else that we've done for Fallout. But in the meantime, this is our stim pack spritzer because it has a stim pack. Yeah. Which you add and then you do a little stir. I want to say Bucky is very cooperative of you with a drink in your lap. He's never that good for me.
Cheers.
Cheers. He always kept trying to drink my drink.
If there's a more beautiful sight than this, Edna, I can hardly imagine it. Yes, Alt City is beautiful too. Point is, there's no other group of people in the wasteland that can fly on this scale. Even the mighty new California Republic only has a modest amount of gunships taken from the Enclave at Navarro. They certainly aren't using them for combat operations like Maxon is. The Prydwen is a modern-day marvel, one of a kind, really. She was built over the course of several years. Half of that time was spent figuring out how to build the damn thing without pre-war industry backing you up. After that, they spent another 2 years assembling the parts and making it float. This is a rigid-frame airship with lighter-than-air gas safely hidden inside lightweight armor plating. This isn't just a simple air balloon, though, Edna. Look over here. On the flight deck, there are 4 of these hefty pylons that support jet engines, which help regulate the Prydwen's altitude. Few know this, but the Prydwen is actually capable of landing on the ground in emergency situations.
That's why it has the tires.
She's quite a beauty, but in old-world fashion, she requires a lot of power to operate. Originally, she drew on energy from an old fusion plant, but more recently was refitted with new parts pulled from Rivet City's aircraft carrier. For the Commonwealth campaign, she's now capable of crossing the vast divide between the ruins of D.C. and Boston in no time at all. Come on, let's head inside. It's always a surprise seeing this many brothers and sisters in one place. To think that just 10 years ago, this chapter was completely moribund. 20 years under, old lions filed it down to a stump. A group of stragglers camping out in the Citadel, chasing mutants across the capital wasteland and playing at being knights of old. Hell is paved with good intentions. Lions alienated the elders of the West, denying him reinforcements, alienated his own people by betraying the Brotherhood's mission, and then had the remainder throw away their lives, chasing as white whales or doing charity for people who couldn't care less. I can respect Lyons for his convictions, Edna, but as a commander and leader, it's tough after seeing what Maxon has done with the chapter. In no time at all, he forged it into what we see here. A powerful force, capable of reaching out and striking enemies 400 miles away from the Citadel. It took only 10 years, 4 of them under Maxon's direct leadership, and the Brotherhood became mighty. Lyons did a lot of harm to the Brotherhood, true, but he also introduced reforms and changes that were a huge step in the right direction. The Brotherhood used to be very reclusive, as you well know, to the point of sending aspirants to die in radioactive hellholes. Lyons realized this was an unsustainable stance, perhaps when it became apparent that 2,500 miles away from home, you can't expect speedy reinforcements. He instituted a recruitment program among the locals. If you caught the eye of a Brotherhood member, they could sponsor you as initiate. I know Elder Maxon's right hand, Paladin Dance, started his career that way, under the late Paladin Krieg. Then there are the ranks. Beyond the extremes, initiates and elders, the Brotherhood out west still divides its ranks in 3s: scribes, knights, and paladins. The first study, the second labor, the third fight. Lyons changed all that, folding knights and paladins into a single combat caste, while scribes became responsible for manufacturing and research. The Brotherhood is a military organization through and through, so scribes are the closest they have to civilians. Maxon kept both of these changes, so I suspect history won't soon forget Lyons and his wise reforms. It's true, Maxon's reign as elder only spanned the last 4 years, and the groundwork for his rule was laid by the previous string of elders, elected since Lyons died, and Sarah literally bit the bullet. However, it was he who brokered the deal that brought outcasts into the fold, reinvented the Brotherhood's strategy around the Prydwen, and returned the organization to its roots. Many believe that the Brotherhood are all about technology, raiders obsessing over old robots and ray guns, hoarding them simply for the sake of having sweet tech. It wasn't the Brotherhood's original mission. They aren't some sort of guardians of the old order, insanely clinging to the past. They were once a force for good, preserving knowledge and technology for the future, not merely military technology, but also physics, chemistry, medicine. I'm sad to say that many have forgotten that over the years. You could easily argue that the followers of the apocalypse have done more to forward that goal in recent decades. That was until the next great Maxon reminded his people of who they were and what they can be. Technology is merely the means to an end. The laser rifles, power armor, vertibirds, even the mighty Prydwen herself are all tools in the quest to save humanity from its worst impulses. To paraphrase head scribe Free, the Brotherhood is once more the salvation for this tortured planet and its people. And while humanity won't perish without them, it will certainly thrive with them present and helping. Who would have thought a decade ago that the Brotherhood would have an entire separate cast just for their air fleet, the Lancers? This airship is just as impressive on the inside as she is on the outside, wouldn't you say? The main deck here is the beating heart of the Prydwen. We're standing where most of the crew sleeps. This deck is located under those giant gas containers I mentioned earlier. Did you know that hydrogen is the lightest element on Earth? It helps keep the airship afloat, but it's also highly flammable. If one of these containers ever ignited, well, this is the last place I'd want to be. The Prydwen is mighty and built to withstand a lot of punishment, but she doesn't carry weapons. She relies on her crew to defend her, and gunships to get that army where it can do the most damage. The enemy doesn't know what hit them. And knowing Maxon, it's pretty obvious who that enemy is. Yes, Edna, the Institute, as well as any other group that gets in their way. Like the swarms of feral ghouls below at the airport, or the super mutants that roam the Commonwealth, or especially raiders. The Brotherhood is once again at war. I figure Tegan's already planning on how to source the resources locally. He'll probably leave it to the brothers to decide on how to get food from local farmers. Hopefully he'll pick the right people for the job. People who aren't monsters that rob others at gunpoint. The Brotherhood, even on a war footing, has standards. And if they're to win the hearts and minds of the local population, they need more than just vertibirds zooming above, exterminating threats to the people's life and property, ensuring they can live their lives safely without fear of being eaten by a grue. Kel's Lancers will have their hands full, as will Ingram's scribes in ensuring everyone has enough gear to fight. But I wager the most important part will be done by Quinlan and Ingram. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
British accent or no?
But that is a story
we're gonna
for
find
another
out.
day.
But I would have gone, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like a couple of things really stuck out to me. The fact that this thing is obviously so massive and because of the hydrogen element so fragile in a sense. And yet they don't carry any weapons on board. So they just kind of rely on the people to be able to protect the ship. But they don't actually have any weapons of defense, which kind of struck me as like, well, that's a gamble. At the same time, like, if it had guns, it would probably be more of a target because it would be a lot more of a threat. So if you were to see this giant thing coming over your community and it had guns on it and you knew that, you'd be a lot more threatened by its presence than otherwise. So yeah, that just kind of stuck out in my brain. Very curious for the next episode and the Institute.
There he is.
He looks like Craven. I just see him and I'm like, Craven.
Good to see you again. Report it to me immediately. This information could be the final piece of the puzzle. All right, then.
Commonwealth Law, PR 029. As a data procurement specialist, it is my duty to report any pertinent information to local chapters in the area. To that effect, I've prepared a briefing for the Prydwen, updated with the latest intel recovered from the field. I would like to note that this is the type of intel you can only gather while traveling the wasteland proper and speaking with the locals. That is to say, you won't find what I'm about to tell you in some pre-war technical documents. First, context. The Institute as we know it today is a direct descendant of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, one of the finest centers of learning in Old World America, and a major link in military research, including robotics. Robert House himself was a graduate of CIT, which should come as no surprise.
There's a Spider-Verse in here.
This particular alumnus would go on to form Robco, arguably the most influential tech company in the world before mankind blew itself to hell. Other major fields of research at CIT included genetics, nanotechnology, electronic warfare, and more. In the chaos of the Great War, the Commonwealth Institute of Technology escaped destruction. A warhead possibly intended for the Institute wound up destroying a residential section of Cambridge, sparing most of the campus. Against a backdrop of unmitigated chaos and the deteriorating humanitarian situation, even the strong military presence in the metropolitan area and outside the city couldn't stop the violence from spreading. The survivors took shelter below Cambridge and CIT. Rather than build upwards, they started building downwards, digging into the soil beneath Boston.
Smart.
It's important to note that the Institute we know today wasn't actually founded until 2110 by the next generation of scientists, a generation born underground. We know that the original Institute wasn't the isolationist organization the Brotherhood is facing now. At first, they attempted to coexist with the people of the Commonwealth. Seems like mutual distrust wound up dismantling this project, and the Institute wasn't exactly helped by the destruction of the Commonwealth Provisional Government. As noted in an earlier law, the CPG was an initiative to create a provisional government for the region, much like the initiative put forth by Aradesh and Tandy out west. Except the founders of the NCR were not wiped out by a synth sent to the proceedings. Curiously, if it wasn't for the guidance of Elder Rhombus, we may have filled that role as the Steel Plague. The Institute insisted on an isolationist policy in the wake of the CPG's failure, aided by the completion of their molecular transmitter circa 2180. Any efforts to locate a surface entrance to the Institute are in vain because there is no entrance. After their teleporter was completed, all entrances were sealed following the invention of the transmitter. I wager it's this isolation, coupled with the advances in synth technology, that contributed to the Institute's decision to abandon the surface and focus on developing underground, as well as the decline in their moral standards, treating the surface as little more than a giant petri dish. Part of you has to admire their ingenuity, though. The technological edge of the Institute is undeniable. The Brotherhood still relies on salvaged goods, even for our power armor. The Institute, on the other hand, manufactures all of their goods. Standardized energy weapons, explosives, clothes, armor, and most impressively, synthetic biological organisms. And not just synthetic humans. The data included on the drive indicated the presence of synth gorillas. The Institute has devised synthetic gorillas as an offshoot of its biological research program. It seems the Institute will pursue any avenue of research. Perhaps that's why they approved research into the forced evolutionary virus in 2178 in an effort to create a superior synth generation. And as we all know, they managed to achieve that goal eventually, after creating a whole new type and generation of super mutants using their modified FEV. The super mutants we keep encountering throughout the Commonwealth are unfortunate victims of the Institute's sick experiment. First, they are abducted from the surface, then subjected to FEV transformation, and once the data is mined, disposed of by unleashing them onto the surface.
That sucks.
This callous behavior does make sense from a strategic viewpoint, as the super mutants interfere with human populations above ground, preventing them from banding together and organizing, and becoming a threat to the Institute. My fellow surface dwellers have no reason to love the Institute. They are victims of its operations and activities, much like pre-war Americans were the victims of its own government's actions. Beyond the destruction of the CPG, the Institute was also implicated in the Broken Mask incident of 2229 at Diamond City. An early third-generation synth went berserk on an infiltration assignment, causing that persistent paranoia about synth infiltrators to emerge.
It looks like they're just like from Game of Thrones.
Of course, is the Institute's
Like from
abduction of
Yeah.
people for medical experiments or replacement. I think the entire scope of the Institute's crimes against humanity won't ever be known to us. From what I gathered, the Institute practices strict compartmentalization in each of its 5 divisions. Let's see, there's advanced materials, biosciences, robotics, synth retention, which is a little autonomous kingdom of its own. What binds them together, beyond their incredibly vague goal of redefining mankind, is the Director. Chairing the Directorate, the Institute's governing body, the Director is responsible for defining policies, breaking ties, and determining the end goal. In other words, each division moves on its own. The Director simply tells them where to go. The current Director is a bit of an oddity. Under his tenure, the Institute is aiming for autarky, with a clean fusion reactor meeting all of their power needs. They want to be left alone to redefine man underground. Only problem is, they don't want to extend that same courtesy to those living above ground. Like Morlocks preying on the Eloi of the surface. But it seems the Institute miscalculated. Synths, as advanced as they are, aren't the trump card they're supposed to be. The cracks are starting to show, and I suspect that CIT's greatest asset might prove to be a liability after all. But that chapter is yet to be written. A story for another day, perhaps? Edna, end recording.
Brothers and sisters, the road behind has been long and fraught with difficulty. Each and every one of you has surpassed my expectations by rapidly facilitating our arrival in the Commonwealth. You have accomplished this amazing feat without a hint of purpose or direction. And most impressively, without question. Now that the ship is in position, it is time to reveal our purpose
She was questioning a
and
little bit.
our mission.
I mean, I like the Storyteller, but I can't say that I'm on the side of the Brotherhood.
Yeah.
But I'm also not on the side of the Institute.
Oh, God, no.
Like, so it kind of sucks because you're like, neither one of them being fully in control would be a good thing.
So much to unpack in that episode. It was really good. So one thing that came to mind is they were talking about the Institute and how, like, it obviously hadn't always started off with such moral decay. Like, that was a gradual thing that happened over time. And then they kind of talked to some of, like, the highlight events, like that virus they created and whatnot. We recently finished the final season of Billions. I'm not going to do a spoiler because I'm not even going to say who says this line. But what I couldn't help but think was this line that is said in one of the episodes of the final season when, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he says, you know, I was the compass, but a compass that's even slightly off by a fraction of a degree will wind up taking you in a very different place from your intended goal if you travel that path far enough and long enough.
Yeah.
And that kind of is just what it made me think of when they talked about, like, the Institute and these lofty goals and these well-intentioned experiments that then progressively just deteriorated more and more so as they began to view the surface dwellers as just experimental creatures that they could have fun with.
You get why they started to become isolationists, but it's weird. I mean, we always talk about how you need to like learn your history, and those that don't learn it are doomed to repeat it. So to go ahead and say, oh, they should give them another chance, it's like, because it was just the one time that someone like something bad happened, like that's just life. Like sometimes you can't go around just because someone screws you over once doesn't mean you got to mistrust everybody for the rest of your life. Like that's no way to live.
Or judge everyone like that person or who bears any similarity to that person in any capacity.
Yeah, exactly. Then at the same time, it's like, if they trusted the outsiders and then they got screwed over again, it's like, oh, well, they're not learning from their mistakes. So I can see the argument for why they're doing what they're doing.
And I mean, on the other side of things, having just bashed the Institute, and rightfully so, the Brotherhood, so this ultra militaristic organization that has modeled itself under or after knights and everything. The period in history in which there were knights is like this highly romanticized time, and it's thought to be all adventures and heroes and everything. It was a really bad time if you weren't amongst the royalty who could afford to be a knight or more. It was entirely a time of have and have-nots and feudal lords and serfs. Looking at that and going, hey, that's the period in history that I think we should model ourselves after. That doesn't bode well. And being a super militaristic organization that doesn't question anything and just follows commands.
That you did it without question. That was the line, yeah.
Yeah, that is not comforting at all. I think, and this, I'm going to bring it full circle now with Billions again, but we were talking about, like there's a thing in there about loyalty. And while we were watching it last time, I was like, what is with these guys and loyalty? Like it's all these rich jerks who are like, I want unquestioned loyalty from all my people. And it's like, no, a good leader wants to be questioned, should be questioned, should be challenged, because that's what's going to make them either A, have to defend their position in a way that's going to get everybody on board with it, which means it's got merit, or it's going to make them not do a thing that they would have otherwise done and been a really poor decision. So full circle, neither of these sides are good.
Let us know what you thought about this down below in the comments. And if you want all of our Fallout reactions, check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there. Got a link to Patreon, get early ad-free access. We're about a month ahead on our reactions over on Patreon. Thanks so much for checking out our reaction for Fallout Season 4, Episodes 7 and 8. But just keep in mind
that our reaction is definitely not definitive.